We have a massive amount of news to cover today, including a whole bunch of GPU news. We got the 50 series production getting going and 40 series getting phased out, some new RX 8000 RDNA 4 leaks. We've got a new game bundle available for Nvidia GPUs, Nvidia killing the Geforce Experience app, what's it being replaced with, a new DLSS update, a new driver updates. We got a whole bunch of new follow-up information about the 9800X 3D and its availability, a new Steam Deck, new other gaming handheld performance numbers, and a whole bunch of gaming information in general. Let's circle back around to this, but first, some of you guys are making a huge mistake on your gaming PC setups, and that is not thinking about what chair you will be sitting on the entire time. Instead of trying to adapt to your chair situation or a lawn chair, all sorts of things that are going to be damaging your back over time, those crappy gaming chairs, you need to get an ergonomic office chair that is massively adjustable to fit your body rather than you trying to squeeze into whatever the heck it is you are currently using. I cannot stress this enough how much your back will thank you. Head over to the link in the video description or pinned comment for FlexiSpot and check out their C7 ergonomic office chair. It has an adjustable headrest. It has self-adaptive back support, breathable mesh back, which helps so much for those long, sticky, sweaty gaming sessions to be less sticky and sweaty and gross. 3D adjustable armrests to get into perfect mouse position for your gaming, adjustable seat depth, adjustable height, forward seat tilt, reclining ability. It's amazing, and not only that, they stand by it with a 30-day return policy for a risk-free trial and a 10-year warranty with direct replacement for damaged parts. Not only that, check out the Black Friday sale that's coming so you can grab the best discounts on FlexiSpot, including standing desk, ergonomic chairs, and more, and use my code 24BFC7 to save an extra $50 on the C7 chair. Huge thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. All right, back to the GPU news. We have Nvidia shifting production to the RTX 50 series and most of the 40 series getting shut down in production. That would be an attempt for Nvidia to sell out most of the 40 series stock before they start trying to sell their 50 series, so that you would have less of what happened last generation, where the 30 series was massively overproduced due to a crypto boom, which then faded out right as we launched the 40 series. And so you had a bunch of 30 series stock competing with 40 series, and that had a lot to do with why I think the 40 series launch cycle was kind of delayed, taking additional months to get the full series out compared to normal, and could have had some impacts on pricing. Nvidia wouldn't want to price the 40 series aggressively enough that you wouldn't buy out their old stock on the 30 series. So in general, what this is pointing to is trying to avoid that same kind of issue with the 50 series. We'll have to see what happens. Now, this isn't official from Nvidia. This is, well, I got it from videocards.com. All my sources will be linked in the video description as usual, but they're getting their information from Board Channels, which is a site that kind of has a lot of people with inside discussion around like the AIB posts and things like that. The main post they're referring to basically says this. They have Nvidia's latest RTX 50 series GPU will be launched on time in January and will not be delayed any further, which means that the RTX 40 series has entered the final stage of inventory clearance with only about 2 months left. Nvidia's real RTX 40 GPU production line capacity has long been gradually transferred to the RTX 50 GPU production, and the main production line has been fully transferred. So the RTX 40 GPU is now in the final stage of inventory clearance. According to the latest news from upstream internal sources, Nvidia has completely withdrawn the 8106 production line, and the production capacity has been fully transferred to the RTX 50 series production line, with only the 8107 production line temporarily retained. Therefore, the RTX 40 series GPU has entered the final quarter of inventory clearance, and the RTX 40 mid to high-end series GPU has gradually stopped production and supply, and product switching has been accelerated. The supply of AIC brand manufacturers in the future market will become less and less. Video Cards then follows up with the latest rumored dates for when we will get each 50 series card. The latest rumors is that we'll get a 5090, a 5090D version for China, and a 5080 version coming in January. whereas the 5070 and 5070 Ti could be launching in February, and the 5060 and 60 Ti class products coming in March. That would be a much faster time frame than the 40 series, which dragged out multiple months between launches of different product series. So, have to see what actually comes out of this, but that's what we've got for you so far. Now let's circle around to what is going on with the latest in AMD, RDNA 4 rumors, and all of that. The latest headline I could find is AMD Radeon RX 8000 RDNA 4 mobile GPUs include a 16, 12, and 8 gigabyte variant, up to 175 watt TGPs. So notice that this is talking about mobile GPUs, and it looks like there will still be some 8 gigabyte variants. I know a lot of people are like kind of feeling done with 8 gigabyte graphics cards, but I think there's a good chance they're still going to be around, at least on the more budget segments. Hopefully nothing too expensive has 8 gigabytes this time around, but we'll have to see what happens. That's one of my big question marks for this upcoming line of GPUs. Now, where's this information coming from? I found it posted at WCCF Tech. Where are they getting it from? They're getting it from Golden Pig Upgrade Pack, which is a Chinese language outlet that does have a lot of leaks on variety of PC hardware and tends to be accurate, meaning there's a good chance that he has sources within either, board manufacturers and places like that where they would have some access to this type of information by this point. So basically, that says that the RDNA 4 GPU lineup will include at least 4 SKUs, which would be the following: R25M, Navi 48 at 16 gigabyte, 256-bit bus, R25M E4, which would be maybe Navi 48, 12 gigabyte, 192-bit, R25 P6 Navi 44, 8 gigabyte, 128-bit, and R25M P4 Navi 44. 8 gigabyte, 128-bit. So we'll have to see what, what those actually get called, when do these come out, how powerful are they, all of that. But that's the latest I could find for you from the RDNA 4 side of things. Remember, the overall plan, as we've seen it discussed, is for RDNA 4 not to try to compete at that flagship level, but to be more competitive in the mainstream market segments where most of the actual sales happen. There's also been a lot of talk about AMD trying to get like an AI version of FSR out there. And just in general, it sounds like there's going to be an effort to compete better on the feature set, competition with Nvidia, but maybe not at the flagship performance level. And then pricing, where's that going to be? We got a lot of stuff to find out. But let's talk about something that isn't leaks and rumors. This is something we know for sure, and it's affecting you right now. If you are looking to buy a new 40 series GPU before the 50 series launches, and there's, some talks about tariffs possibly making PC hardware a lot more expensive in 2025, and if that's the case, might not be a terrible idea to, get a Black Friday deal on a 40 series GPU, especially if it comes with a game you're interested in. Now, I always caution people to only consider the value of a game as, is it a game you would have actually wanted to buy anyway, right? Otherwise, it's not really saving you money. But if you were very interested in playing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, you could get a copy of that game with most RTX 40 series GPUs. However, if you read the list, it does not include the 60 class GPUs. So if you were going to buy an RTX 4060, that's not going to get you a free copy of the game. Looks like pretty much everything else will, including laptops. But again, even on the laptops, not on the 60 class. But anyway, always good to see extra deals getting thrown out there. So if you were going to buy a GPU anyway, getting something else thrown into the mix is certainly not something to complain about. Now, what I've seen a lot of people not complaining about, but instead celebrating, although some people complaining about, because, nobody online can, we can't all agree on everything, right? Is that Nvidia is killing off Geforce Experience. So this has been in the works for quite a while now. Nvidia has had a beta version of an Nvidia app where the end goal has been to phase out Geforce Experience and eventually phase out the Nvidia control panel and merge all of those features into a single app that has a better design than both of its predecessors that would be feeding into it, run quicker, not require a login like Geforce Experience did, better design, all sorts of things. That's the goal here. Now, the Nvidia app has finally had a 1.0 release. It is out of beta, and it now pretty much can do anything Geforce Experience did, but also can do a lot of the things that Nvidia's control panel has generally done. It doesn't have all of the features of control panel yet, so there's still going to be some time before I think Nvidia would really phase out the control panel. Because they're not trying to get rid of features, they're trying to get everything into one place. And they've been, it seems like, working on the most commonly used features first and going from there. My experience with the Nvidia app has been generally positive. It does seem to be quicker to do things than, especially once you get used to where things are located, compared to the control panel. And it also doesn't make sense to have some features split between two different apps. I think it does make sense to combine it all into one place, as long as it's not then requiring a login, which this does a nice job of not requiring a login unless you're on the redeem page. So as far as the overall pages go, there's a whole bunch of options. You got a home screen with a whole bunch of recently used programs, things like that. You've got an NVIDIA overlay, which now I think not only looks a lot better than the Geforce Experience version did, but also now supports 4K 120 FPS AV1 video capture, whereas the previous overlay did not. The driver updates now not only allow you to update the drivers, but has a better list of what's new and what's fixed when you do check the graphics driver page. The graphics settings options that it's always had in Geforce Experience now also allow you to control some of the settings on a per game basis that used to be in the NVIDIA control panel. So it's kind of nice to have those in a unified location. That is definitely an improvement. Again, you can access things like display settings, G-Sync, things like that, which again used to be over in the control panel. And now it's all in one place. Also, this gives you access to things like your video super resolution, HDR features, like they have the HDR, the RTX HDR, where you can add HDR into games that didn't previously have them. It's pretty cool stuff. The redeem page is where you would require a login, nothing else does. And then some more settings and things like that. I'll link this blog post in my video description if you want to see a whole lot more about this, because this isn't an entire video dedicated to this topic, which you could certainly make. I actually think Hardware Unboxed did make one, kind of talking through every little detail of the app changes and all of that. But I think overall, this is a very good change, and I'll probably test out some of these features in general in separate dedicated videos. Now, NVIDIA has also updated their drivers. Sorry, not just their drivers, sorry. NVIDIA has updated DLSS version. So the latest version of DLSS is now 3.8.10. Now, this actually makes a pretty significant change where it's actually removed a bunch of DLSS profiles. Now, if you just use DLSS in games and you've never looked at it more from either the developer side of things or like tweaking your DLSS settings side of things beyond what's available inside of games, this is probably something you weren't even aware of existing, but we could talk a little bit about it. Because the change basically comes down to this. DLSS has added in and had available a variety of presets that tweak minor things about how DLSS actually works, and certain modes were better at certain things. So like, for example, there was a preset A intended for the performance, balance, and quality modes of DLSS, which was an older variant best suited to combat ghosting for elements with missing inputs, such as motion vectors. Whereas you had stuff like preset B, which was intended for ultra performance mode, but otherwise similar to version A. And there was preset C, which was good for performance, balance, and quality modes, a preset which generally favors current frame information. well suited for fast-paced game content. Anyway, the point is there would be slight differences in the amount of ghosting, and some people would get into like DLSS tweaks where you would change the preset that a game was using compared to what the developer selected, because usually this would be something that's more developer-facing. The game developers would decide which of these versions to use. Now, the big change here with 3.8.10 is that you're just losing access to presets A, B, C, and D. We've had preset E available for a little while. I think it was added in with DLSS 3.7. Does this article go into that? Yeah, it says DLSS 3.7.0. Added in preset E. But preset E is now pretty much the default preset, and games are just gonna use that, it seems like. And so this is now the default preset for performance, balance, and quality mode, and generally favors image stability. And then there's also going to be only one other mode available, which is preset F. And this one is intended for use with ultra performance mode, or even using DLAA, so where you're just using the anti-aliasing rather than an upscaling technique. And that will be the default preset when you select those modes. So really, this is kind of reducing the amount of tweaks that you had available to you with this update, which is kind of interesting. However, I think it's had the benefit of reducing the file size of the DLSS DLL, because by removing these profiles, I think the file size is smaller, so there's that. Anyway, so that is the update on that. And there's also an Nvidia Driver update. This is providing game-ready results for Stalker 2, which is coming out soon, and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. There's also some fixed issues, general bug fixes, etc., as usual, so you can take a look at that if you like. And Intel also has updated their drivers, and this is kind of interesting because the main update doesn't actually seem to be affecting games or the drivers themselves so much as they've reduced the file size by combining what used to basically be two separate drivers within one driver package that you would download. Previously, the integrated ARC GPUs actually had kind of a different driver than the discrete desktop ARC GPUs. It looks like those have now been unified, which has reduced the overall package size. So you can see that the latest version is 1.1 gigabytes, down from 1.6 gigabytes. However, if you compare that to Nvidia drivers at 689 megabytes and AMD drivers at 772 megabytes, Intel still has larger driver download size. Not this is the end of the world or something, but just in comparison, you can see that. But anyway, so it looks like they have moved it to the Arrow Lake drivers, the integrated Arrow Lake drivers not being on a separate driver, and those are now integrated together. Anyway, we also have Intel talking about their Core Ultra 200 series CPUs, and that the gaming performance was worse than they expected based on their own internal testing. So apparently they claim to have been surprised at the overall gaming results when third-party reviews came out. And they're talking about Intel launching an investigation to try to fix this through microcode updates, BIOS updates, what's going on with Windows. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see if we end up getting better performance out of the 200 series. I found this article at WCCF Tech, but they are quoting an interview on Hot Hardware where they had this interview with Robert Halleck, which was a VP and GM at Intel. He specifically said, "I can't go into all the details yet, but we identified a series of multi-factor issues at the OS level, at the BIOS level, and I will say that the performance we saw in reviews is not what we expected and not what we intended. The launch just didn't go as planned. That has been a humbling lesson for all of us, inspiring a fairly large response internally to get to the bottom of what happened and to fix it." So that's a pretty interesting quote. They also talk a little bit about their move away from simultaneous multi-threading technology and designing cores differently for power efficiency savings and things like that. It's an interesting interview overall. But yeah, so I'll be curious to see if anything ends up coming out of these OS level issues and BIOS level issues, and if we end up getting some better gaming performance out of that series of processors. Now, they've been getting absolutely decimated by AMD's new 9800X 3D. One thing I love to look for, a week or so after big hardware launches is the 3dcenter.org meta-analysis, where they take a whole host of review outlets and they combine all of their scores together to get an overall percentile difference, averages of a bunch of different sets of hardware. That way, if you get a much fuller look at it than any one individual review outlet would be able to get you, at least as far as the overall relative performance, whereas individual reviews can get you a lot better idea at specific games and use cases and things like that. Now, there's also a difference here. Let me translate this to English. Here we go. Anyway, there's also a difference between application performance and gaming performance. Because if we set the 9800X 3D as the 100% baseline like they did here, and you look at application performance, a lot of which can utilize the efficiency cores in Intel's architecture, you can see that chips like the 285K and even the 265K are generally significantly better than the 9800X 3D, and even the 245K is almost at parity with the 9800X 3D. It's a little bit slower, but as soon as we go to the gaming performance, this is where it's an absolute bloodbath. And if we see the 9800X 3D set as 100%, absolutely nothing comes significantly close, with the second place position being AMD's own 7800X 3D, and chips like the 14900K and 285K falling short. You can look at the overall average of all of those review results down here to get a good idea of how those perform relative to each other. And then there's also an interesting chart here where you look at all of the X3D chips generationally as a comparison point, which I think is pretty cool. So if you wanted to look at if we set the 5800X 3D as the baseline, so if you're on a 5800X 3D, what kind of upgrade would you be looking at? The 7800X 3D ends up averaging out to almost 19% faster than the 5800X 3D, but the 9800X 3D comes in as about 32% faster than the 5800X 3D. So you'd be getting an over 30% gaming performance jump, but again, as always with CPU reviews, you would only realize that gaming performance gain in CPU limited scenarios, which it's possible you're not CPU limited if you're on a strong CPU like the 5800X 3D, at least not at all times. A lot of games have certain frame time spikes, your 1% lows and things like that, which are CPU limited, so sometimes it can smooth some of that out, but I've talked about that in other videos. Another really interesting follow-up I found to the 9800X 3D content is looking at the different X3D, the 9800X 3D versus the 7800X 3D, when both are locked at 4.8 gigahertz, but also when compared with their non-3D Vcache versions, so the 9700X non-3D and 7700X non-3D, also when locked to 4.8 gigahertz, and also all with the same RAM. This is from Computer Base, putting this one out, and I encourage you to look at this whole thing. It's got more results than what I'm going to talk about here. But I want to talk about what we can learn from these settings. So these are all at DDR5 5200, CL32, and all at 4.8 gigahertz. So the only differences here is going to come from the chips themselves. Now, what I really like with Computer Base's articles is you can mouse hover over any of the results and it'll set that as a 100% baseline to then scale percentage differences for the other chips. So there's a lot of interesting ways we can look at this. One is that they have the, if you set the 7800X 3D as the baseline, they have the 9800X 3D as being 15% faster. But remember, this is not at stock use cases. This is removing the clock speed advantage for the 9800X 3D. So this is saying that there's a 15% gaming performance uplift for the new X3D part, even without any clock speed increase compared to the previous generation, since they're both set to 4.8. Another interesting thing to look at is if you look at the 7700X as the baseline compared to the 7800X 3D, we can see that in the 7000 series, the X3D part seemed to increase performance by 36%. Again, when clock speed is irrelevant and memory is irrelevant, right? When that's all set the same. But then when you look at the 9000 series, where we look at the 9700X to the 9800X 3D, we see a 43% performance gain. In other words, it seems like the 9000 series 3D cache is of more benefit to the 9000 series than the 3D V cache was to the 7000 series, which is kind of interesting. So whatever advantage there is to the new 3D V cache, or maybe the 9000 series is more bottlenecked in some way that the 3D V cache is relieving, more so than the 7000 series was. There's been some talk about whether it's like the I/O die related to the memory, something like that. Anyway, so I think this is interesting testing that you could look at quite a bit. They also have some power numbers and things like that, but I don't want to take all of their results. You guys can follow the link in the video description and take a closer look. But the thing is, with people so excited about the 9800X 3D, we've got a lot of sites showing sold out. We have Mind Factory, which is a large German retailer, saying that they're not expecting to be able to restock until late December. But I see other retailers with different listings. For example, if I go ahead and look at B&H Photo, they have expected availability on November 22nd. So the point is, it looks like that there's a lot of excitement for the 9800X 3D, so it's selling out. I'm hoping those become available before tariffs hit, if that's going to be a big thing. I actually really need to buy one of these because I don't review CPUs, so I didn't get a review sample, which is fine. That's totally fair. I'm going to buy my own. But I'm hoping to be able to buy my own before I have to do new GPU reviews, because I do GPU reviews. And so it's best to do GPU reviews on the best CPU to relieve as much CPU bottleneck as possible to get the true performance of the GPUs. Not that if I had to use my 7800X 3D, it would probably be a massive issue, but I'm really hoping I can buy a 9800X 3D before the new GPUs come out and I have to do those reviews. Anyway. However, we've seen at least one 9800X 3D burn up in the socket. Now, since there's only been one that I'm aware of, odds are this was just a random fluke, either with an issue with this user's motherboard or just something with their CPU, something with their setup. In other words, there's absolutely no reason to believe this will be a widespread issue. But if we started to see more of these, that would be something to take note of. Remember, the 7000 series did initially have some CPUs burning up due to a bad motherboard setting, and that did actually end up turning into a story. It's way too early to call this as being a big deal unless we start to see more of these. So that'll be the interesting thing to keep track of. Now, a few quick notes before we go. We do have a new Steam Deck coming available. It doesn't have any upgrades over the normal Steam Deck OLED. However, it does have a white shell and gray buttons. So if you're into that old school, this reminds me of some old school PlayStation controllers and things like that. I think it's a pretty cool design. So anyway, if you're thinking about getting a Steam Deck OLED, maybe you're interested in the white version that comes out on November 18th. If you're interested in a handheld with more performance, though, we're starting to see at least a tiny bit of benchmark available for AMD's new Ryzen AI 365 and HX 370 based gaming handhelds, compared against the ROG Ally X with the Z1 Extreme, showing up to 15 to 20% performance improvements. But this is not based on a wide number of tests, especially for the HX 370 version, where we don't have a lot of tests available here. This videocards.com article has summarized the results here, and we also have at some different TDPs and things like this. In general, for the handheld stuff, I'm most interested to see, once the 15 watts, like the Steam Deck runs at, has a part that is actually able to have meaningful performance gains over what the Steam Deck can do at 15 watts. That's where I'll be a little more interested in. That's when Valve says they're kind of waiting for before they do a next-gen Steam Deck. Do want to mention that the Stellar Blade PC version has been confirmed to be targeting 2025. And the developer shift up is actually expecting it to sell more on PC than on PS5, as noted by the developer talking about how well like Black Myth Wukong, for example, sold on PC. So this would be really interesting to me on the bigger picture beyond this one game. If PC sales start to become a larger focus for developers. Because I think the PC market tends to grow and grow and grow. And what's really interesting when I talk to my students, because I am a high school teacher, is a lot of them either game on their phones or are interested in getting gaming PCs or have gaming PCs. And I feel like compared to when I was that age, like it was almost everybody had a console, and it was kind of like the weird nerdy kids had the gaming PC. I don't know if it's maybe like streamer culture, like on Twitch has maybe shifted PCs to be a more mainstream or desirable target for gaming. Anyway, I'm interested to see if the PC platform continues to grow, as console market share seems to have kind of stagnated if you look at the sales compared to like, PS4 versus PS5, that kind of thing. I don't know, just an interesting thought. Now, also, we have the PlayStation CEO learning things about the PC market, but apparently, I don't think they're learning the right thing about the PSN requirements. If you read this quote, he seems completely out of touch. So he says, currently we're in the process of learning. Basically, with regards to new IP, of course, you don't know the results until you actually try it. So for us, for our reflection, we probably need to have a lot of gates, including user testing or internal evaluation. And then we need to bring them forward, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, I liked when he talked about the PlayStation Network. So he says, we have learned a lot. The way to face the issues regarding for PC, for instance, the PlayStation accounts that we have offered, well, actually by offering them, for instance, sometimes that tends to invite pushback. This is a mild way of saying that a lot of PC gamers are extremely upset about the PlayStation Network accounts. He calls it offering them, whereas what it actually is requiring them even on single-player games, which means you literally cannot buy the games legally in a large number of countries in the planet. Anyway, now he goes to talk about how the PlayStation Network account helps maintain order of gaming on live service games. In other words, he's talking about how it could be of benefit for live service games. He's completely not acknowledging that they're requiring this on single-player games, like God of War Ragnarok, for example. So that's, I don't know, he does not seem to be acknowledging the issue that people actually have with this, and that's a little bit frustrating. Speaking of issues, although these ones actually being fixed, although probably not all of them, a while back we had the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition come out on PC to massive disapproval. Now, one of the issues seems to be being fixed in a new patch, which is introducing the classic lighting mode. So one of the complaints was that the game just didn't have the color filtering the same way the original did, which completely changed the feel of the game. That's what this patch is addressing. So for example, now we get this kind of lighting instead of this kind of lighting. You guys would agree that that is a very, very different feel to the art direction of the game. So pretty important. Would have been nice if it was out, when the game actually launched, but whatever. Also, I had some thoughts about whether games are getting too big. And the Yakuza creator is also discussing that in this interview, but I'm noticing this video is getting rather long. But I just want to leave you guys with this. I've been playing a lot of games recently, and sometimes I find myself really struggling to finish them, not because they're difficult or because I'm uninterested in the main quest, but because I kind of have OCD, and it's hard for me to leave side quest content alone because I don't like to pass things up and miss stuff. But at the same time, a lot of times the side quest content in these big open world games, and even if they're not open world, but just big games, there's just like boring side quests that are like maybe a 6 out of 10, and your main quest is like an 8 out of 10, but it makes the whole game feel more like a 7 out of 10. Like, in other words, like, I think sometimes less is more. A smaller, shorter game that's more focused, and the average quality of the content in the game is higher by removing the filler crap could be an improvement. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.